Hey y'all, it's Jennifer. Welcome back to my channel. Today I am coming to you with kind of a Valentine's themed video, which is going to be all about my favorite romances in books. And some of these are not going to be straightforward romance books, but they are books where I think the romance is the most enjoyable part, actually. But before we get into the recommendations, today's video was kind of inspired by Ana Luisa, who I am collaborating with for this video. Ana Luisa is an awesome jewelry company who I have worked with many times before, and they are having a pretty incredible Valentine's Day sale right now where you can buy one piece of jewelry and get one 50% off. I will have a link in my description box so that you can go check out Ana Luisa and look at all of their neat products. But since I've worked with them many times before and y'all always see me wearing their jewelry, you probably know I just really love Ana Luisa. And a lot of that is due to the fact that they are a carbon neutral company. And so that's really valuable to me. And what's really awesome about that is you would think to get something that is carbon neutral, to get something that is very conscious of environmental impact, you would think there would be a very high price point for it. But Ana Luisa pieces do not break the bank, which is another reason that I just really love them. I got 3 pieces today to kind of treat myself. I'm my own Valentine. And so the 3 pieces that I got today are all silver. I know I'm more of a gold girl typically, but I have been feeling the pull to silver jewelry lately. And that's one thing that I really have always enjoyed about Ana Luisa is that their jewelry doesn't tarnish. It's always shining. And I knew that their silver would have just a gorgeous shine on it. I do have on just some regular silver hoops that I've already gotten from them, but for my second hole, I really wanted something smaller, but that was still eye-catching. So I picked up the Hannah Lee silver, which is kind of a mismatched pair where one has like a dangling dagger and the other has just 2 little dangling balls. I really love that because I never wear anything other than just kind of a plain hoop in my second hole because my second hole is so sensitive. And I really wanted something that if it was going to be small, it would still be eye-catching and still create a look. These right now, I basically have not taken them out of my ear since I got them because I'm obsessed with them, and I've gotten a lot of compliments on them, again, because I think they're so shiny. I'm normally a statement earring kind of girl, so I really appreciated something that felt like a statement piece, but was on a smaller scale. I also got these necklaces. Now, 2 of these necklaces go together. The Willow Silver, which is this lower necklace with a flat silver pendant, and then this shorter necklace that's kind of got silver beads around it. So they came together and they are meant to stack. I've really been enjoying the stacked jewelry look. That's something that I thoroughly enjoy doing. And for the past year, it's what I've just really loved. And so I really wanted some stacking silver jewelry. And then I also got the Elise pendant, which is kind of hanging perfectly in the middle between these 2 other necklaces. And that has a stone. Again, when it catches the light, it's just stunning to me. I have a few stone pieces from Ana Luisa, and I just think it's really interesting how they never seem to tarnish or lose their shine, and I never feel like I need to have them cleaned. And so that's something that I was really excited about when I saw that they had a gemstone kind of pendant in silver. I really, really wanted that. So again, I will have a link in my description box. If you missed the Valentine's Day sale, I always have a 20% off discount for y'all. These are great everyday pieces that you could gift to someone else, but you could also gift them to yourself. That's what I'm doing. I'm my own Valentine. Treat yourself. So definitely click on that link in the description box down below. But now let's get into some romance recommendations. I feel like y'all know this about me at this point. I am not really a straightforward romance fan. It takes a lot for me to really get engaged in what I would call a straightforward romance book. But there are several that I have really enjoyed, and that's mostly been in the past year that I've stepped outside of my comfort zone and actually picked up something that is really termed a romance. So a lot of these books are books where the romance is maybe not the main focus. For me to enjoy a romance, I think a key thing that has to occur is that it can't just be a plot line of 2 people getting together. I really need there to be an extra plot. I need something else going on, and the romance to be not on the side, not in the background, but I need it to be not the main focus 90% of the time for me to really get invested in it. So if you were looking for something to kind of scratch the romance itch in the Valentine's Day season, I hope that you can find something here. I want to go on and start with two authors that I just think write romance well. The first of these authors is Leigh Bardugo. I feel like she's a pretty obvious author to put on this list because I think that is something that the majority of us have enjoyed about her books, and specifically about the Grishaverse, is just how invested we got in the character dynamics. And throughout her novels, it's not just romantic love that you are really invested in, but there's just such great friendship and what we might even term platonic love throughout her series that you also get invested in. That's just really wonderful, in my opinion. Even in books of Leigh Bardugo's that I didn't particularly enjoy or that I didn't rate very highly, such as Ninth House, I still really enjoyed the character dynamics. And I would have to say the romance, or the hinted at romance, is easily the strongest suit of a lot of her books. And for me, my favorite romance comes in her first trilogy, the Grisha trilogy. I am a big fan of a couple that it seems like not many people enjoy. I will say this is the only time in my history as a book reader that I have ever picked someone in a love triangle that the main character ended up with. And so part of me just feels vindicated whenever I talk about this, but also just because I really, really loved the romance here. And I loved the fact that in this initial trilogy, it's set up as a love triangle. You'll find throughout this stack that I love a love triangle. I really, truly do. But I think what made this masterful is that the love triangle was not just two different romantic options for our main character, but it was two different ways of living. And I always felt like the love triangle and the conversations that the characters were having, I felt like that was true to Alina, our main character, throughout the trilogy. And so I felt like the choice she made at the end was a choice she wanted. And sometimes I don't always feel that way with love triangles. Sometimes I feel like there was an obvious way a love triangle had to go, and it didn't feel authentic to the characters. Maybe it was just because one option was more popular than another. But I really felt like, especially in this initial trilogy, that our main character got to make the choices that she wanted to make, and she wound up with the person that she had always wanted to be with. And I think that was just really valuable, and that was really refreshing, and thus it is a romance that I think about all the time. Another author I want to talk about is an author that often gets mentioned on my channel, and that's Juliet Marillier. I am holding up Daughter of the Forest, which is my favorite book of hers and is also my favorite romance that she's ever written. But romance is easily the most enjoyable part of 90% of her novels. The plot is very interesting. There's always a lot going on, but I find that with Juliet Marillier, you are far more invested in the characters and their relationships to each other than you are invested in the plot or what's going to happen next. And that is certainly the case for me in Daughter of the Forest. Daughter of the Forest has some pretty high stakes in terms of plot, and so you're definitely reading it hoping that the plot is resolved, but a lot of people's problem with this book is just how slow it is and how much it focuses on the development of our main character, Sorka, and also on her love interest, who I won't spoil because I actually didn't know who it was in the first half of the book. But to me, that's what makes this book so dynamic and so strong, is the fact that we spent such a long time with her as a main character. And then we also spent a large amount of time with her as she explored friendship with her love interest and then finally accepted romance. This was an absolutely beautiful book. It's not just because of the romance, but the romance to me is something that stuck with me for years. And for a time, for months after finishing this, I constantly wondered about the main characters, and I wondered how they were doing, as if they were real people. This is just one of those special books. It's not every day you come across something like this to me. And this one was just jaw-dropping in terms of the plot, in terms of the characterization, but also in terms of the romance. And I think if you are generally a romance reader, you would probably enjoy going into this. This is marketed as a fantasy, and there are definitely fantasy elements present, but I don't think they take over the plot. I think if you were a character-driven reader and you were interested in historical fiction, but you were also interested in romance, you would love her. You would specifically love this book and this series. The second book in this series is the one that everyone talks about in terms of romance. And, you know, it's fine. but it doesn't have the magic that this one does. The other book of hers that has a standout romance for me is Wildwood Dancing. It is incredible. I mean, I just was so invested in that romance. It was really incredible. I find that in every Juliet Marillier book, I'm really interested in what the character dynamics are going to be, and I don't always know who the main character is set up to be with, and I think that's fun. I know that a lot of people who are interested in romance really want to know who the love interests are, and they want to be guaranteed that these two people specifically will get together by the end of the book or by the end of the series. That doesn't really matter to me. I think it's really fun when a character has multiple options or multiple partners, or if they form a relationship with a character and then break up with them. I think that's interesting and I think that's fun because it makes for interesting character work, and it's not always clear to me where Juliet Marillier is going to go, so I always have fun with her books. She is definitely an author I would recommend if you are interested in a strong romance component, but you don't necessarily want the book to be straightforward romance. Before we get any further, I do want to talk about my favorite romance that I've ever read, and it is in The Infernal Devices by Cassandra Clare. I know, yes, we're going here. Okay, we are. This is a trilogy that is set within her Shadowhunters world, and you can read it independently of the other books. I think that's one of the ideals about this series. It is set in Victorian London, and it is in some ways a loose retelling of A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. It leaves you in legitimate, almost physical pain. I say I cry at books a lot. What I often mean is that I get choked up. You know, tears don't ever fall for me. This series, I was crying, like literally I sobbed. Like ugly cry, like your face turning red, like tears just coming out of your eyes. Like I had to get up and get tissues. I cried reading this. And I know that probably is telling you that you're not going to be very interested in this, but it is easily the best romance I have ever had the privilege of reading, the best characters I have ever had the privilege of reading. Truly, this is some of my favorite writing that I've ever read, some of my favorite characters I've ever read, but in truth, it is specifically my favorite romance that I have ever read. Nothing will ever top this. This is a series that has a love triangle as well. And I, along with I think 90% of the readers, wish this was polyamorous. I mean, truly, I wish it. What's the plot here? I almost couldn't tell you. It doesn't matter because it is about Will, Jim, and Tessa. And it's one of those things, like I often find this when I watch television shows. I think the best romance is sold to me on television or on film when I can tell that a character is in a different scene without their love interest, but they're thinking about them. And I'll give you a good example of this. If you've never watched Scandal, stop what you're doing and watch Scandal. But that is one where the main characters were sometimes not together. They weren't in the same room. They weren't in the same setting at all. But I could tell they were thinking about each other. And that is great acting. That's great performance. That is what happens in The Infernal Devices. Sometimes when these characters are on their own, they are consistently thinking about the others in the triangle in such an interesting way. And I just think this was masterful writing. She has never written anything like this again, before or since. And it's just incredible to me how this series stands on its own and stands atop the others in the series. The other series is good. The other books are really good. The other characters are great. But there's something about this that I still think about. It has been 6 years since I read this. I think about Will, Jim, and Tessa all the time. Another of my favorite romances of all time is a book that I guess I would say is in some ways a straightforward romance, and that's Frenchman's Creek by Daphne du Maurier. This is a pirate romance, and I read this when I was on the search for more pirate romances. This is about a woman who's at home when a pirate basically rolls up in the middle of the night and is like looking for somewhere to stay safe. And their romance really builds in a very interesting way. There is a lot going on in this that doesn't have anything to do with their romance, but it is such a dreamy romance in that it kind of functions in a similar way to something like maybe Titanic, in that the romance is there and that's what we're focusing on surface level. But what it really is kind of a woman falling in love with herself or becoming more of an independent person and choosing to do things herself. And that's kind of how Frenchman's Creek functions to me. It's got a really interesting subtext. Some of it's not really great because this woman does have children and they don't really figure into the equation for her very much at all. But I think this one is a really interesting one to analyze. As with everything that was written by Daphne du Maurier, this is very layered, it's very deep, and it's very thought-provoking. And so while this is a romance that's really dreamy and swoon-worthy, it's also got a lot going on in terms of things that you want to have a conversation about. And so this is one that has stuck with me for many years. I'm due for a reread. I'm really scared this is one that won't hold up, actually. This is the one that I am most worried about on this list, that if I were to reread this, I wonder if it would fall quite a bit for me. But right now, it still is one of my favorite romances. Someone I most certainly should have mentioned in my author section is Stephanie Garber. Because I really, in the end, can't choose a favorite couple of hers. I can't choose a favorite book of hers. I just think, in general, the romances that she has written work so very well. Now, Stephanie Garber is a fantasy writer, and so again, so much else is going on in these books than just the romance, than just two people getting together. But I think that is easily the most interesting part of her books. That's the reason that I can't put her books down, is that I'm really excited to see what the characters are going to do next, and I'm really excited to see who's going to end up with who. She is another author who sometimes it isn't clear what choice the main character is going to make, especially in this series, which started with Once Upon a Broken Heart. Almost every person who is introduced could conceivably be a love interest for the main character, and so you're not really sure where this is going to go. And I think that makes it a lot of fun, but Stephanie Garber also has a really whimsical, dreamy, ethereal way of writing, which makes her romances function to me kind of in a really fairy tale sense. Not in a dark fairy tale sense, but in kind of a Disney fairy tale sense. And I think that's really fun. That's really refreshing. And she has written most of the characters that I've had a book crush on in the past few years. It's been a long time since I've gotten invested in a romance the way that I have in her books. And I think I might favor this series, Once Upon a Broken Heart. I think I might favor it a little bit more than Caraval, though I think the romances of Caraval are really, really interesting and really strong. And so she's definitely an author I would recommend, but my favorite romance is coming in this series, I feel. Let's take a break from everything else for a moment and just talk about fae romance. Fae romance is my guilty pleasure. I love it. I will read it forever. There's nothing better to me. Truly, there is nothing better to me. Even when they're bad, they're still good. It's just like pizza. Even when you've had what you can call objectively bad pizza, it still was pretty good. And so I really love fae romance, and fae romance is typically what I tend to read when I need to get out of a reading slump. I'm kind of currently in a reading slump, so I'm feeling the pull to reading some fae romance quite soon. One of my favorite fae romances from the past year is something called 10 by Candace Robinson. This is a series that is a retelling of The Wizard of Oz with fae. And I know that sounds weird, but let's just go with it. Just go with it. The first book is easily the strongest because it is about a fae who is kind of the Tin Man. And now we're getting into some weird stuff, but I've always liked the Tin Man. Not that I've really ever shipped him and Dorothy, but that's basically what this book is Dorothy and the Tin Man getting together years after Dorothy has been to Oz. And I just really loved this because it wasn't just their romance, but I really loved the character dynamics of everyone else. This is fun to go into because most of us have a knowledge of the Wizard of Oz when we go into this. And so it's fun to see how the author chooses to flip things on their head in this retelling. But I just loved the description of 10 in this. I was so into the romance because I just really was into him. This is the first, I think, on this list that I would say is a straightforward romance. This is all about them getting together. But because it is a fantasy romance, there is an underlying plot that's really pretty interesting and that sets up the rest of the series in a really great way. And this one definitely saved me from a reading slump. Another of my favorite Fae romances is These Hollow Vows by Lexi Ryan. This is a series that gets a bad rap, and I understand it. I really truly do, because a lot of people talk about this series as if it is Sarah J. Maas light. Sarah J. Maas could have been in this video 100 times. But I chose not to include her because I thought I would be talking about her for 30 minutes. So this one is in many ways kind of a rehash of A Court of Thorns and Roses. As that is one of my favorite series of all time, I'm fine with that. I really am okay with it. I think where this differed was really interesting, and I personally just really enjoyed the dynamic of the love triangle here. I will not tell you who I liked in this love triangle because, of course, she didn't pick him. That's the way it goes. I literally never, almost never pick the person that they choose at the end in a love triangle. At this point, I've learned to expect it. When I start to like a character, I go, well, it's not going to be you, buddy. But I really enjoyed this, and I wasn't mad at the love triangle. I wasn't mad at the ending of it. This is a duology, which I think is another strong point for it because it is 2 books and done, and it tells a pretty tightly plotted story. Definitely the romance is the strongest point here. If you start interrogating the plot in any meaningful way, you're gonna find a lot of holes. But if you're just in this for a fun ride and to read a great romance, then I think you'll probably really enjoy this series. There are a lot of Fae romances out there. They've really saturated the market at this point, but I do think this one had something unique, and that's the reason why I tended to really enjoy it. I loved the main character a lot, and I often don't say that, particularly in romance novels, because I tend to find that most of the time the female lead is pretty bland or uninteresting, and I think that's largely because in a lot of romance books, the main character kind of functions as your way into the story as kind of a self-insert. But I thought that the main character of this duology made some really great choices, and she was a very dynamic character in her own right. So I just really enjoyed this for her, but I also really loved the male love interests. I really picked this up based on the cover because it was so pretty, and I couldn't believe she had bangs. That's actually a plot point in this, is why she has bangs, and I just thought it was fun for a fantasy heroine to have bangs. But this is definitely one of my favorite Fae romances, and if you feel like you're going into a slump, this is definitely a series to pick up. I want to talk about one of my favorite series of all time, and that's Fireborne by Rosaria Munda. This is in no way, shape, or form a romance series. This is a series about dragon riders. It is in many ways a loose retelling of the Russian and French Revolution. It is a very political fantasy. Romance is in no way, shape, or form the main point of this book. But there is a romance that spans the 3 books in this trilogy that once again will leave you in a lot of pain. It's very angsty, and it's very understandable. I think a lot of times when you're reading angst and romance, it's because people will not sit down and have a conversation with one another, and that's a really big pet peeve of mine. To me, in this series, it makes a lot of sense why the characters act the way that they do, specifically to each other, but it also makes a lot of sense why their relationship is fraught, why they can't be together. And while it is definitely the lesser of the plot points in this series, the romance is one of the stronger points of it to me because the characters are so well developed. You understand these characters so well. By the end of the first book, frankly, that you understand every decision that they make, and whether it's right or wrong, you are on their side. And that's one thing that I think this series does brilliantly is nothing is ever black or white. Nothing is ever the right decision to make. And that's even true in the romance. So this is one that I tentatively recommend because if you are really a romance reader, if you're really looking for a romance, this is maybe not the series for that because there's a lot going on. There's many, many reasons why this is frankly my favorite YA trilogy of the past few years. But the romance is a key component of that to me because the characters are so incredibly well developed. But one of the key components of this series for me was the romance, and that's one of the main reasons that I loved it. We then have Iron Widow by Xiran Zhao. I have talked about this ad nauseum, and I know a lot of people have. This is kind of a sci-fi fantasy story that is a retelling of China's first female emperor, and it features a polyamorous relationship. This is another one where certainly a lot is going on. There's a very complex plot. There's a lot of moving parts in this story, and maybe the romance doesn't necessarily seem like it's going to be the main point of this book. But for me, it is the reason that I was so invested in this. There was a lot about the sci-fi elements that just kind of went straight over my head, but I frankly didn't care if I was confused or not because I was so deeply invested in the romance. And I went into this knowing that it was going to be a polyamorous relationship rather than just a love triangle. And so I was immediately put at ease because I knew that no matter who I liked more in the love triangle, it was still going to end up okay because it was a polyamorous relationship. I thought this was so interesting because once again, the subtext underneath the relationship and underneath the romance meant that this was very dynamic in terms of how our main character was making decisions. And I personally really loved that. It had a lot to do with kind of the political context of the book, but it also really meant that our main character didn't necessarily have to choose one way of life over another. Yes, the plot here is good, the writing is gorgeous, it's just a really wonderful ride, but the romance is what kept me coming back, and I think is easily the strongest point of this book. Last but not least is once again, maybe not a straightforward romance, but a book that features very strong relationships, and that is Lovely War by Julie Berry. This book is set up in such a way that Aphrodite is the one telling this story, and it's about two couples in World War I. This book is dreamy, it is eloquent, it is very sad because it deals with World War I, but the romance gives you such hope. And to me, what I remember most about this book and why this book has stuck with me is not individual romance, but just in general how the book talked about love and how it talked about not only love in a romantic sense, but in a platonic sense between friends. I just thought this was a really meaningful novel, and it is one that I am consistently shocked that I see no conversation about. When this came out, I remember a little bit of buzz, but I am always shocked that this one doesn't rate more highly for people and that it never figures onto people's favorites at the end of the year, because this is a really stunning novel. And I think it is one that you should pick up if you love romance, you should pick it up if you love Greek mythology, you should pick it up if you love historical fiction. There is a very interesting blend of genres here, but I think it works so incredibly well. And so I just would really love to see this book talked about more. It's a fantastic read. So those were just some of my favorite romances, actually, because now here at the end of the video, I've thought of at least 10 more that I probably should have included. But if you're looking for something to read this Valentine's Day, I hope that one of these recommendations works well for you. Remember to check out Ana Luisa. I have their link down in my description box. But that's going to be all for me today. I hope you're all having a great week. Happy reading. Goodbye.